The lie is not hidden. It stands in plain sight, clothed in language, adorned in slogans, whispered through every advertisement and painted on the walls of our restless minds, that you must become something, that life begins not here, not now, but later when you have attained, achieved, ascended. This is the first wound, the infection that seeps into consciousness before memory. It is not placed there by malevolence, but by ignorance, passed from parent to child, from culture to soul, like a torch that only burns and never illuminates. The will begins to stir before the mind learns to question. It twitches like a dying insect, seeking warmth in the illusions of identity, purpose, legacy. But it is not desire that deceives, it is the belief that fulfilling desire will bring peace. The child learns quickly. Applause silences, fear, praise numbs rejection, and ambition dulls the abyss. From this arithmetic of avoidance arises the feverish pursuit of meaning, not in being, but in becoming. You run, not because there is somewhere to go, but because to stop is to feel the hollowness gnawing through the scaffolding of self. The world rewards this motion, this kinetic delusion. You are told to dream, to strive, to build. No one warns you that every skyscraper of ambition stands upon a graveyard of neglected selves. No one mentions that to chase success is to trade presence for projection, to abandon the only certainty, the now, for the trembling fantasy of soon. You become a mirage to yourself, existing always at the horizon of satisfaction, never within the oasis of contentment. You begin to believe that you are not real until others believe in you. And what is this belief? This need for recognition? It is the shadow of abandonment, the ancient ache of having been unseen. The self, left unattended in early solitude, learns to perform. It wears masks so long, it forgets it ever had a face. The voice inside says, achieve, and they will love you. Win, and you will be worthy. Shine, and you will exist. But existence was never granted by applause, and love that must be earned is not love. It is conditional captivity. So begins the quiet violence of motivation. It appears noble, even heroic, to sacrifice for a goal. But what if the goal is a phantasm and the sacrifice is your soul? Motivation is often a euphemism for compulsion. You are not choosing to work, to grind, to hustle. You are fleeing from silence, from stillness, from the unbearable confrontation with your own unmet pain. The world calls this ambition. But a man running from fire is not ambitious, he is desperate. Each act of self-improvement often conceals an act of self-rejection. The gym becomes a temple, not of health, but of shame. The books you read become apologies for not knowing enough. The wealth you seek becomes a salve for the belief that you were born lacking. You strive to be good enough, not because you are unworthy, but because you believe that worth must be proven. The poison lies not in the action, but in its source. And that source, more often than not, is fear dressed in the clothes of virtue. Fear of being no one, fear of not mattering, fear that the silence means emptiness. But the silence is not empty, it is simply not performing. It does not echo your name, because it does not need to. It holds you not as a role, but as a being. The ego cannot tolerate this, for it thrives on drama, narrative, noise. It would rather be tormented by desire than extinguished by peace. And so, it creates urgency where there is none, problems where there is stillness, missions where there is only breath. Modernity is built upon this panic. Entire economies depend on your dissatisfaction. Happiness is a liability to growth. If you were content, what would you buy? What would you chase? What would you click? So, dissatisfaction is cultured like bacteria, nourished in your psyche through comparison, idealization, curated lives displayed like trophies on screens. You do not envy what others have, you envy what they seem not to lack. And that is the cruelest deception, that somewhere, someone is complete. But no one is complete. Everyone is a cathedral under reconstruction, always patching the cracks, never questioning the blueprint. Suffering is not an anomaly, it is the default mode of conscious life. Pain is not the problem, it is the proof of your depth. To feel deeply is not a defect, but a privilege. It means that illusion has not fully sealed you off from the real. that somewhere within you still remember a time before the self began pretending. What is left when you abandon the race, when you do not seek, strive, or seduce fate into granting you validation? What remains is a strange and terrifying freedom, the kind that does not sell, the kind that does not sparkle. You become ordinary, you become no one. And in that dissolution, you find not despair, but rest. No more needing to be seen, no more needing to be needed. Just the quiet rhythm of breath, the subtle warmth of existence without narrative. Even love, the most sacred of illusions, carries its price. Most of what we call love is not reverence, but refuge. A mutual agreement to distract one another from the void. I will make you feel valuable if you do the same for me. And yet, true love, if it exists at all, is found not in clinging, but in witnessing. Not in needing, but in allowing. Most relationships are transactions wearing the mask of eternity. When the mask slips, we call it heartbreak. But the heart is not breaking the illusion island. To be alive is to suffer. Not because life is cruel, but because desire never rests. Even when fulfilled, it breeds more of itself. Like a parasite, it feeds on the host's momentary joy, draining it into expectation. There is no climax, only escalation. The feast always leaves you hungrier. And so, the wise do not seek pleasure without end, they seek the end of seeking. The most dangerous thing in the world is not failure, but the fantasy of success. For it keeps the will chained to the wheel, turning endlessly, aging without ripening. And what is death, if not the final unmasking? You will not carry your victories. You will not be asked for your resume. You will be returned to silence, not punished, not rewarded, just released. The question is not whether you will die, it is whether you will have ever lived outside the chase. The ego fears this. It wants legacy. It wants to be remembered. But memory is a decaying shrine. Even the great names become dust in the mouth of time. And you ordinary, striving, trembling, you are no exception. Accept this. Let it wash over you like cold water in the morning. You do not need to matter to be. You do not need to be exceptional to exist. The flower that blooms unseen still opens. The bird that sings alone still completes the sky. Everything you have chased was a mirror, not a door. It reflected your hunger, but led nowhere. And now, standing amid the ruins of ambition, you may finally see the quiet miracle that you were always whole, not in spite of your suffering, but because of it. The cracks were not flaws, they were openings. The pain was not punishment, it was the only thing real enough to pierce illusion. Let yourself sink now. Not in defeat, but in surrender. Not to despair, but to what island stopped trying to be. And notice that you already are. Still, aware. Unimpressive, perhaps, but present. There is no greater freedom than to be unnecessary. No greater peace than to be unremarkable and unafraid. Here, in the final stillness, you see the truth. All your motivation comes from one dangerous source, the belief that you are not enough. Strip that away, and there is nothing left to chase. Only the bare, unadorned, unyielding now. It does not applaud, but it does not condemn. It's simply island, and so are you. Suffering is not the exception, it is the undercurrent of all being. Even in moments of fleeting joy, the shadow of loss nestles quietly beneath the surface. Every smile anticipates its end. Every embrace knows it must one day release. The world, in its glittering complexity, is a mask worn by pain. Behind every ambition is a wound. Behind every attachment, a tremor of fear. We build cathedrals not to house God, but to silence the howling within. You suffer not because something is wrong, but because you have dared to exist. To be is to want, and to want is to be torn. The will does not ask your permission. It rises from the depths without mercy, dragging you toward objects it promises will complete you. Yet nothing completes. Each fulfillment is but a comma in the sentence of craving. The banquet of life serves only appetizers, never the meal, never the end. The hunger is immortal, you are not. The face you wear in public, the confidence you perform, the story you repeat to feel real, none of it belongs to you. It is the costume of survival, stitched together by fear of rejection and the need for belonging. But deep within, there is a quieter you, the one untouched by flattery or condemnation, the one who watches without speaking. That one does not care if you succeed. That one does not care if you are loved, it only longs to rest. Detachment is not an act of will. It is what remains when the will collapses from exhaustion. When you have tried every pleasure, worn every crown, chased every echo of worth, and found them all dust, something loosens its grip, not out of wisdom, but out of fatigue. This is not apathy, it is lucidity. You do not rise above the world, you sink beneath it, into the substratum of being, where the mind no longer argues with reality. Love, too, must be seen clearly. It is not a romantic myth sold by poets and merchants. It is the temporary convergence of two solitudes, each trying to escape itself through the other. We call it destiny, we call it passion. But often it is just fear meeting, fear two half-formed selves clinging to warmth in the cold. And yet, even in this illusion, there is a strange beauty, not because it lasts, but because it tries. You do not suffer because you are weak. You suffer because you are conscious. The animal feels pain, but does not ask why. You do. You create meaning from agony, architecture from chaos. But meaning is not inherent. It is a projection, a mirage on the desert of existence. When the meaning collapses, when the narrative frays, you are left only with what has always been. Breath, gravity, sky. Even your memories are fabrications. You think you recall the past, but what you hold are impressions, colored by the hunger of the present. The past no longer exists and perhaps never did in the way you imagine. You are not who you were. You are not even who you are. The self is a process, not a person, a current pretending to be a rock. And the more you cling to it, the more you drown. Letting go is not noble. It is inevitable. All things are taken, not given. You do not own your body, your time, your relationships. They are on lease from a universe that never signs contracts. What you hold dear today becomes tomorrow's ash. This is not cruelty. It is the natural order, the ceaseless flow from form into formlessness. To resist it is to suffer twice. You long for peace, but you seek it in movement, in fixing, gaining, improving. But peace does not arrive through addition, only through subtraction. When you no longer need to be anyone, when there is nothing left to win or prove, peace arrives quietly, not as ecstasy, but as the absence of torment, like a room emptied of noise, like a hand released from clenching. Grief is the teacher no one wants, but everyone receives. It strips you of illusion. It leaves you raw, exposed to the silence beneath the world. And in that silence, you begin to see, not with the eyes of desire, but with the eyes of truth. Everything is perishing, yet everything is sacred, not because it lasts, but because it passes. Even sorrow, once embraced, becomes a form of grace. You stand at the edge of the world, not to leap, but to see. To behold the vastness, not with terror, but with stillness. Life is not a story with a climax. It is a procession of moments, each already complete. The tragedy is not that it ends, but that we refuse to live it while it lasts. We are always elsewhere, chasing echoes, fearing silence. But silence is the final refuge. Not emptiness, but fullness without noise. The self disappears there, and with it all need for performance. What remains is awareness, not of what should be, but of what island. And in that awareness, suffering softens, not because the pain has ceased, but because it no longer demands explanation. There is nothing to become, there is nothing to fix, there is only this. The breath you are drawing now, the weight of your body against the ground, the ache that reminds you that you are alive. And perhaps, just beyond the ache, a stillness waiting to be noticed, not grasped, not held, only noticed. This is the quiet revolution, to stop running, to stand in the ruins and see them not as failures, but as the only honest architecture left, to be ordinary and unashamed, to be here, in the decay, without needing to decorate it with hope. For even the dust carries its own kind of beauty. Even the end is part of the pattern. And you, fragile creature of will and worry, you are not lost. You are simply waking up. The truth does not arrive like a sunrise. It drifts in like fog, slow, uninvited, erasing contours, softening the outlines of certainty. It does not thunder. It mutely devours what you once believed was solid. The ego architect of delusion begins to falter, not because it is challenged, but because it grows tired. There comes a point where even lies exhaust their capacity to comfort. The performance loses its audience, and you find yourself alone in a theater that once echoed with applause, now silent but for the creaking of old floorboards. This is not despair, it is the prelude to awakening, not the enlightenment of the mystic, but the collapse of the false scaffolding we call meaning. What you thought was purpose reveals itself as a placeholder for pain. The pursuit of happiness was a detour to postpone grief. But grief is not your enemy. It is the only honest companion you have had. Grief does not lie. It does not flatter. It sits beside you like a shadow and waits for you to stop pretending. You once believed suffering was a problem to solve. You sought techniques, doctrines, and therapies, all attempts to silence the unrelenting ache that whispered at the edge of every victory. But the ache was never a malfunction. It was the truth, leaking through the seams of illusion. It was your soul, starved by the ceaseless striving to become what you are not. The pain did not arise because you failed. It arose because you tried to be more than what is, because you treated existence as a means rather than an end. Modernity sharpens this illusion with surgical precision. Every device, every notification, every curated profile is a mirror tilted just enough to distort. You do not see others, you see projections, masks made luminous by desperate hands. No one is content. Everyone is trying to be seen, and yet no one is truly looked at. The more we connect, the lonelier we become. For connection without presence is only noise, and noise is the death of awareness. To be aware is to be wounded. It is to feel the texture of time as it slips through you, to notice the futility in your gestures, the ghostliness of your goals. The aware soul knows that the world is not what it promises. Pleasure is thin. Comfort decays. Love evaporates under the sun of expectation. Every form, no matter how golden, will dissolve. This is not pessimism. It is simply vision, unobstructed by desire. You crave permanence, but nothing remains. Even memory, your final refuge, betrays you. It rewrites itself with each recall. The face of the beloved fades. The voice you once clung to becomes distorted, distant, an echo rather than a presence. You do not remember people, you remember your longing for them. They become symbols, not beings. The past is not a vault. It is a mirage built from fragments, reconstructed each time with the materials of the now. And the now, this fragile, vanishing moment, is all you have. But it is not enough, is it? You want it to mean something. You want it to build into something greater. But the now does not build. It burns, it flickers and disappears. You try to capture it with photos, with words, with rituals. But every capture is a death. The only way to know the moment is to let it vanish untouched. And this, too, is unbearable to the will. The will does not rest. It hungers, not for the object, but for the chase. It deceives you into thinking the next thing will be different. The next lover, the next city, the next idea. But the hunger remains, even in satisfaction, especially in satisfaction. For nothing is more dangerous to the will than stillness. It would rather suffer in movement than dissolve in silence. It would rather destroy than disappear. You are not your will. You are the field in which it arises. But to see this, you must endure the terror of nothingness, the moment when all striving ceases and you feel yourself vanish, not physically, but metaphysically. The story stops, the momentum halts, and what remains is void. This void is not to be feared. It is the only space where truth can appear. All else is noise. Illusion is a kindness the world offers to those not ready for this void. It tells you there is meaning in toil, that justice awaits, that you are becoming someone. But you are not becoming, you are unraveling, and that is liberation. The unraveling is not death, it is release. You do not cease to exist, you cease to perform, and in that cessation there is no applause, only peace. Peace is not joy, it is not elation, it is the absence of compulsion, the absence of inner warfare. You do not need to be loved. You do not need to be understood. You do not need to be seen. You need only to stop pretending that these things will complete what was never broken. The self does not need repair. It needs forgetting. Let the self dissolve. Let its memories fall like leaves. Let its ambitions rot. The ego fears this as annihilation. But you are not your ego. You are the awareness that notices its decay. You are the silence that watches thought arise and fall. When all else has gone, friends, status, youth, relevance, you remain. Not as a person, but as a witness. And that witness does not suffer. It's simply island. Most will not understand. They will see your detachment as coldness. They will say you are disillusioned. They are right. You are disillusioned. You no longer believe in the game. And so you step outside the arena, not in bitterness, but in stillness. You do not shout at the world to change. You no longer need it to. You let it spin, as it always has, without you at the center. There is dignity in this quiet withdrawal, not the retreat of fear, but the bow of wisdom. You have seen enough. You have tasted what the world has to offer, and you have found it lacking, not because it is evil, but because it is impermanent. Nothing here lasts, and what does not last cannot be clung to without pain. Even beauty, the last illusion, must be surrendered, for beauty, too, fades. The body decays, the rose wilts, the music ends. To love beauty is to grieve in advance. But if you grieve without resistance, the beauty deepens. It no longer needs to stay. Its transience becomes its gift. You no longer seek to possess it. You allow it to pass through you like wind through an open window. And so you sit, alone perhaps, unnoticed, unspectacular, but inwardly free. Not because you have found the answer, but because you have stopped asking the wrong questions. You do not seek to become, you simply are, and this being raw, unadorned, silent is more than enough. It was always enough. Only the will said otherwise. This is the secret you were never told, that you are allowed to stop. Not because you've won, but because there is nothing to win. The game was rigged from the start, not by malice, but by ignorance. Everyone is chasing echoes. Everyone is terrified of stillness. But you, now, are not. You have sat with the stillness. You have heard its silence. And in that silence, you found something strange and quiet and holy. Not hope, not joy, but clarity. Clarity that no one is coming to save you, because no one needs to. Clarity that your suffering was not a detour, it was the path. Clarity that what you sought outside was never missing inside. Clarity that this breath, this presence, this now, is all there is, and all there needs to be. And when the final night comes, when the body begins to loosen its grip, when the light fades not into triumph but into disappearance, you will not be afraid. You will have already died to illusion. You will know that the self was never solid. You will know that all your motivation came from one dangerous source, the lie that you were not already enough. And that lie, at last, will fall silent. There is no summit, no final unveiling, no grand arrival where the soul stands triumphant beneath the Sunday. The path does not ascend, it circles, spirals, collapses in on itself. For what you are looking for is not ahead, but beneath. Beneath the striving, beneath the roles, beneath even the suffering. There, in the dim silence, where no one claps and nothing shines, waits the unadorned truth that all was illusion and that this was mercy. You are not here to conquer. You are not here to impress eternity with your impact. You are here because the wheel turns, and you are one spoke among countless others, creaking, bending, always moving, yet never arriving. The universe does not notice your progress. It does not reward the diligent, nor spare the sincere. It unfolds according to a rhythm deeper than justice, older than language. And you, flicker of will, are carried by it, whether you accept or resist. The desire to be remembered is the final disguise of fear. To be remembered is to remain tethered, to believe that echo is presence, that legacy is life. But remembrance is not salvation, it is another burden, another weight. You do not need to be etched into stone. You do not need to survive your body. Let them forget you. Let the name be lost. What matters is not what they recall, but what you release before the forgetting. Release the hope that love will save you. Love is not salvation. It is a mirror cracked, momentary, honest in its imperfection. At its best, it shows you what you already are. At its worst, it hides your emptiness behind its own. You may walk this world without it and still be whole. You may know its sweetness and still remain alone. There is no formula, no guarantee. Only the wind, only the passing, only the letting go. Release the need to find meaning in every ache. Pain does not speak in riddles waiting to be solved. It's simply island, like rain, like gravity. Let it pass through you without interpretation. Let it wound without theater. You do not need to make art of it. You do not need to explain it. It is enough that you feel it without resistance. To suffer without narrative is to suffer purely not as victim, not as hero, but as being. And when joy visits, if it does, let it come and go without grasping. It is not a reward, not a sign of progress. It is a weather pattern, brief and unsummoned. To cling is to ruin it. To chase is to exile it. Let joy touch you like a breeze touches leaves without changing the tree. It does not complete you. It does not redeem the sorrow. It merely decorates the silence for a moment. That is enough. Look now in the stillness. There is nothing to improve, nothing to gather, nothing to protect. You may die with your hands open. You may vanish with no conclusions drawn. And that is not tragedy, it is release. The wave returns to the ocean, not in defeat, but in fulfillment. The form dissolves back into formlessness. And the ego, having fought for so long to be real, finally rests in its own absence. This is not despair. This is the end of illusion. You were not sent here to find happiness. You were sent here to see clearly, to taste the salt of tears and the dust of time, to feel the weight of longing until you understood it could not be lifted, only observed, to witness beauty without needing to possess it, to sit beside your suffering like an old friend and say, "You may stay, I will not run anymore." And now the curtain fades, the stage empties, the performance is over. Not with applause, but with silence. The truth does not stand victorious. It kneels, it dissolves, it leaves no mark. And you, having seen enough, having felt enough, having lost enough, no longer need to be anyone. Not the savior, not the success, not the survivor. Just a breath in the dark, just a flicker in the void. And that, quietly, finally, is enough.